wanting validation isn't bad and it isn't wrong. I was making it bad. I was always looking for what's right and what's wrong. And I always wanted to be right. The ego always wants to be right. So I started asking myself, Rachel Luna, could you be wrong? Could you just let yourself be wrong? And being wrong is not bad. It just means there's another position to consider. That sets you free. Because if you don't always have to get it right, then you have more freedom to play, to experiment, and to fail without feeling like a failure.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the Terri Cole Show. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you today. It's with a friend of mine named Rachel Luna, who has this great book called Permission to Offend: The Compassionate Guide for Living Unfiltered and Unafraid. And her story is really tremendous. I've actually known Rachel for a long time, definitely over 10 years. She is a certified master neuroscience coach. She is a speaker. She also has a podcast. I met her through mutual friends, though, years ago. She's a former Marine. She is a triple negative breast cancer survivor. We do talk a little bit about her breast cancer in the show. So for clarity, I am not an MD or an oncologist, neither is she. We're not suggesting that you or anyone else do anything, right? Anything that has to do with your health needs to have to do with your doctor. So I'm just saying that now because I just actually did the interview. This is a wonderfully inspiring book of how to really live your authentic truth. And I really hope that you enjoy this interview with Rachel Luna as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I'm so excited to welcome my pal Rachel Luna to the show. Look, Rachel has a new book called Permission to Offend, which I love, 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 love. The Compassionate Guide for Living Unfiltered and Unafraid. So let's get into, people are going to want to know how to live unfiltered and unafraid, but I want your backstory first. I want to know why this book. I want to know why now.
Well, I honestly think this book is a couple years late. And I think that a lot of people can relate to that feeling of I'm behind the time. And I will say there's this idea floating around the internet that like, you're right on time. What is for you shall not pass you. And I don't believe that. I believe that there are many things that have absolutely passed me by because I have not given myself permission to offend, because I was afraid, because I held back, because I didn't set boundaries. And I know you are the boundary boss. And it's all of those reasons that led me to write the book, Permission to Offend. So growing up, I come from a very trauma-laced childhood. Both of my parents had AIDS. My father gave me away. I had a lot of abandonment issues. He didn't really give me away. This was just the story that I was telling myself. And it's so interesting because we are telling ourselves these stories every single day, these stories that do not serve us, that hold us back, that keep us silent. And then we start walking in the direction of the dreams and desires, the roles and responsibilities that everyone else imposes upon us. And we tell ourselves this little lie that if I just get there, then everything will be okay. If I just make a 6-figure business, then all my problems will be solved. If I just get married, if I just have a kid, if I just do this, and we do all those things completely out of alignment with no connection to our true identity, and there's no fulfillment. So we start to have success, but it feels void and empty. It feels like a shell. We become a shell of who my deity is God, but a shell of who God created each of us to be. And I found that I was having, I call it safe success. By all accounts, success. College graduate, first in my sibling, really only among my siblings to go to college. I'm a former Marine, a war veteran, all the things. Give me a title. I have the titles. I was on the Today Show, for crying out loud, all the things. Right. And I found that I still did not feel safe to express myself, safe to be who I was because honestly, Terry, I did not know who I was. I was so far removed from my identity and I was living through the lens of everyone else's expectations that it was painful. The way that this manifested in my life was through disordered eating, depression. I turned to alcohol, one addiction for another. And then when I stopped drinking alcohol, and I got sober, then I was addicted to validation. Tell me that I'm pretty, tell me that I'm good, tell me that I'm right. And so it was a culmination. I wish I could say it was just one moment, but no, it was like one failure after another that led me to realize, listen, lady, you were meant to do great things and you have been successful, but you are holding yourself back from a life of extraordinary success and massive impact if you don't get your head out of your butt and figure out who the hell you are, and then make sure that you live according to that.
Amazing. It's funny that you talked about the validation because I made a mark in the book when I was reading it. Don't waste your potential getting high on validation. And this is on page 145. And it says, I'm just going to read a little excerpt.
Yeah.
Getting sober. The key to kicking validation addiction is to replace validation with verification. You might be wondering, well, Rachel, isn't that trading one addiction for another? No, it's not. Here's the difference. Validation is an emotional need. Verification is an analytic, thank you, assessment. So let's talk about that a little, because I think that some people would say that is a distinction without a difference. I say no. I totally agree. And it's funny, the thing you mentioned is literally the thing that I underlined, because I feel like it's so valid for my listeners and for my clients. So let's talk a little bit about how you broke that pattern of being addicted to validation. What did it look like to move into that discernment?
So it actually first had to go back to the identity piece. And also, I'm a New Yorker, New York City, born and raised, very tough. So I didn't even want to get intimately familiar with myself. In fact, when people said like self-love, get to know yourself, value, I would roll my eyes and be like, yeah, that's for weak people. All you punk it. Yeah. I had a lot of thoughts about it. But what I realized as I was going through my own healing journey was that I was afraid to confront the truth of who I was. And I was afraid that some of the stories and the lies that I was believing about myself, I was afraid that they might be true. I was afraid that maybe I wasn't really good enough, even though that was the story. I'm not good enough. I always wanted to be told you're good enough. The story was that I was rejected by my father. I wanted people to tell me that I was accepted. I wanted to be in the cool kids club. And even as I became an entrepreneur, I remember like wanting to be in the circles of, I want to be in the A-lister. I want to be in the VIP. I want. And all of that wanting just creates a void because it just reminds you and highlights that you don't have. So the first step was recognizing that I already was enough, with or without the accolades, with or without being part of the A-list, the quote unquote A-list in whatever industry that you're in. And then here's the really cool thing. Like if you really think about these A-lists in each industry, they don't stay in the A-list. Like that A-list rotates. Just wait your turn. Just be in your industry long enough. Just do good work long enough. Just help people long enough. And before you know it, you will be in the A-list, right? Yeah. But more importantly, you will stop caring. Like I could give a rat's tail. I don't care at all. So that was the first step. Then the second thing was recognizing that wanting validation isn't bad and it isn't wrong. I was making it bad. I was always looking for what's right and what's wrong. And I always wanted to be right. The ego always wants to be right. So I started asking myself, Rachel Luna, could you be wrong? Could you just let yourself be wrong? And being wrong is not bad. It just means there's another position to consider. That sets you free. Because if you don't always have to get it right, then you have more freedom to play, to experiment, and to fail without feeling like a failure.
That's so amazing, though. I want to stop for 1 sec on the right, wrong, this need to look at the world in this very two-dimensional way, which is so common, especially when we're younger, because we're trying to make sense of all these things that are confusing or scary or don't make sense. Yeah, and yes, the ego does always want to be right. But in changing that frame, which is what you're saying, in allowing for experimentation, exploration, play, mysticism, magic, all the things that happen when we're like, I don't know. Maybe I just don't know the answer to this, or maybe I'm not sure exactly where I stand on something. Maybe I need to do more work, is so liberating. So I could see how that was a part of this journey. But I also feel like there's something so powerful that you're talking about we want to get away from the painful stuff of life. And so it's almost like being tough. I mean, I grew up in Jersey, but lived in New York for 30 years. So like I understand you, and the sort of the forward motion of like just getting it done sort of, or just not stopping. And what it sounds like from you getting to the point of writing this book and sharing what you've learned is that you gave yourself permission to pause.
So many times. Yeah. Permission to pause and permission to just be. I think people don't take time to be with your thoughts, challenge your thoughts. I love what you said about, I'm not sure my position on this or that. And I find that we live in this society where people want you to take a position. And we're almost in an age where if you are down the middle, you are getting crucified because you're being villainized for not taking a position one way or another, because people want to make meaning. The brain wants to make meaning because through making meaning, then the brain can decide, is this safe? Will I live if I go down this path, or will I die? And I want to liberate us from that. I do want us to take positions for and against. And I talk about this in chapter 1, activating your truth and figuring out what you believe. And then in chapter 2, we talk about identities. What do you value and what do you believe? Because that's really what encompasses our soul identity. I'm not talking about gender or anything like that. Just like, what do you believe? What do you value? If you can get clear on that, you can then also have that play of, I'm a Christian. I value my Christian beliefs 100%. And also I question some of the doctrine because I value human beings and I value freedom of expression and I value people being themselves. So there's some dissonance there between what my religious programming has taught me versus my value system around humanity. Why can't we have a conversation about the intersection?
Right.
That's what I really aim to do with the book, is to neutralize those supercharged conversations so that we can create more community and connection, even in our differences.
Right, which I think is beautiful and so incredibly needed right now. But what do you say to people who have a fear of having these conversations? How do you walk someone through having hard conversations?
I'd say practice first. I do not recommend people just start popping off at the mouth and offend, quote unquote, offending left and right. And we should be very clear that when I speak about giving yourself permission to offend, I am not advocating for cruelty or the weaponization of the contents of this book. Rather, I'm saying take a position for or against your beliefs, be true in your convictions without attacking or condemning the beliefs and positions of other people. So we need to be clear about that. Then I say, find your safe friends. We all have, I hope, at least one person. And if you don't, please slide into my DMs and I will be the safe person for you to try some of these ideas out on. But you have your 1 or 2 safe people and say, listen, I want to talk about this. I feel like I'm going to say some really dumb things. I feel like I'm going to say some things that could maybe get me canceled, but could you just workshop with me through this? Because I don't know exactly what I believe or how I feel about it, or I do, but I want to make sure that my delivery is kind and compassionate and empathetic. So practice first.
Yeah.
And then let them poke the holes in your arguments. Let them give you the hardball questions and build that resilience, because you know the nervous system is going to react.
Mm-hmm.
So let your nervous system react in the safety. And then you might want to practice with a friend who's maybe not inner circle, but is like on that next tier of friends,
Right.
before you go out into the world and face the wrath of humanity.
The wrath of the masses. That's right. In the book, you talk about how to acknowledge our big three fears: judgment, rejection, and defamation. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Okay. So first thing to understand is that judgments are automatic, and yet we fear them. People are so afraid of being judged. And you'll see this. They'll do the reels or the TikToks. This is don't judge me. Don't judge me. And first of all, I say judge away. If you're judging me, that means you see me. I have your attention. I have an opportunity here. So have at it. But the more important thing, and this is like the neuroscience component of it, is that there have been studies that prove that your brain is making a judgment, and it cannot even make out the person's face walking towards you. The brain will decide 8 seconds before you have facial recognition of who's coming towards you, whether or not that person is safe or not. Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
So the judgment is happening. You can't control it. So I like to say the first judgment is automatic. The second judgment is a choice. And we can choose to change our judgments about people. So don't even worry about it. You're judging me. I'm probably judging you. Or if I'm not judging you yet, you're going to do or say something and judgment will form. These judgments are based on our experience and our perception and our programming. I'll give you a really good example. And this past weekend, I held a retreat for some of my clients, and I had a guest speaker, and she is just the most wonderful human being, beautifully, impeccably dressed. She's got her Hermes belt, her, designer shirt, these beautiful strappy shoes. I am looking at her and thinking, honey, yes, you came correct. That was my judgment, positive judgment. Mm-hmm. One of my clients shares with me later, and by the way, there was nothing wrong. It's always a safe space with me. My client says, I had to catch myself because I was judging her. And I thought, oh, here this girl goes with her Hermes belt and her fancy shoes and her strappy whatever. And I was mad because she makes all this money. And I was thinking, here we are, another coach that's going to tell me it's all about the money. But here's the beautiful thing about what my client said. We were both making judgments. Mm-hmm. One was more favorable, one was less favorable, but we both caught ourselves. Mm-hmm. And my client said, I caught the judgment. And then I was able to say, no, let me hear what she has to say, because I could learn something. So the first judgment was automatic. The second judgment was a choice. Okay. The second fear is rejection. Why? Oh my gosh, because does this happen? They're going to laugh at me, right? Remember that movie, Carrie? They're all going to laugh at you. They're going to reject you. You're going to be cut off. This sends a signal in our brain, the primitive, that, old school reptilian brain that we had when we were cave people. How did we survive back in the day? In community. And if you were not part of the tribe, if you were not part of the group, which were made up of hunters and gatherers, then you more than likely were going to die, because you couldn't hunt and gather and build and tend. You couldn't do it all by yourself. Our brain still thinks that there's something in life that is true about that. And that if we get cut off from the group, we're going to die. Here's the thing that I like to remind us. Number one, that's not true. You're not going to be cut off. Even if you get quote unquote canceled, look around. People have been canceled left and right. They go into hiding, they come back, they reinvent themselves, they find a new corner of the universe, they find a new group of people, and that new group of people welcomes them with open arms. So whatever your thoughts and your beliefs are, wherever you've planted your flag, I promise you, you will find the community of people that think exactly as you do. You will find your people again. And sometimes you have to be rejected by the wrong people to find the most aligned people.
Mm.
And then finally, defamation. Like, what are they going to say about me? They're going to talk, but you don't have to accept their story as truth. But Rachel, they're saying things about me and those things are true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, you get to decide if that's who you want to be moving forward, because you are not who you were yesterday, and you do not have to be tomorrow who you are today. Every day it's a new choice. I think what I notice in particular is that we have conditioned ourselves to try to avoid pain and avoid those feelings. Like, can you just give yourself permission to let it suck? I had a client the other day, she said, I feel like I'm going backwards. I said, you're not going backwards. You're just in a tunnel right now going forward. And you don't know, you don't see the light yet. So you can't tell if you're going forward or backward. But I promise you, if you will hold on in the darkness, if you just let yourself go through the abyss, you're going to come out on the other side.
Right.
Go into it.
Right.
We
And
want to
have faith.
Yeah.
You know, I love what you're saying, though, about kind of having faith that the work that you're doing is working, and continue to do the work. You had said something before, Rach, that really struck me about the in crowd and the popular stuff and all that stuff. And you said something that I really, really resonates with me about just keep doing the work. People will find what you're doing. If your intention, if your heart is in the right place and you're willing to do the work. Because, you know, I interviewed Stephen Pressfield, who's an author of my husband, and he collaborated on a book and we're friends. But I just recently interviewed him, and he has a whole thing about excellence. Like, what are we doing it for? Mm-hmm. So he's like, if you're writing, write for yourself. And if other people love it, great. But don't give other people the power to tell you, I mean, unless it's a mentor or something, but like, whether what you're writing is good or bad, do the work. Keep getting in there every day. So a lot of his work is around resistance and not sort of self-sabotaging yourself out of a writing career or a speaking career or a coaching career or a book career or whatever it is, from resistance. And I really loved you sort of shining a light on, it's not quick, right? It's not quick.
Terri, I said this to a girlfriend of mine this morning. I said, look, we have been sold this marketing propaganda that 90 days to your 6-figure life, this is your 7-figure year, whatever the story is. And all of it is this in this like microwave minute. And can you build out a plan in 90 days? 100%.
Sure.
You can develop a beautiful plan, but it will take you longer than 90 days to execute. But Rachel, I saw so-and-so, and she said that she had her 7-figure year, you know, from 0 to whatever this year, right, in this industry, but you didn't see the 10 years of failure before. You didn't take into consideration that this person has a marketing degree or a sales background, or that this person has X amount of connections. Like, we're not looking at the full picture. And we are so used to living in this society where I can ask Google a question, and in a fraction of a second, I'm going to get 345 million responses and possible answers.
Right.
And all of those answers are going to be somewhat right. So can you just give yourself the time and the space to evolve and grow into the fullness of all of your being? You know, it's another, I can't find the word right now, but I don't like it. It's a negative thing in my book, is these lists, you know, Forbes 30 under 30. I think that it's toxic because it puts so much pressure to have it all figured out and to become a unicorn and have $1 billion valuation before you turn 30. Come on now. It's such an unrealistic expectation. And
Right.
for people in closer to our generation, we did not have the resources that these kids have today. So, yes, they're getting faster results. They have faster technology than we had.
Hmm.
So, give yourself that grace. You were never going to have the opportunity. If you are in your 40s, like I am, or older, we were never going to have the opportunity that these kids have today. All we can do is work from what we have right here and right now. And if you are younger, then leverage everything that's available to you.
Right.
You have resources, give yourself permission to access them and recognize that even when you are fully resourced, it will still take time and there will still be many mistakes, as was evident with Netflix's Love is Blind live reunion the other day.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What happened? What was the deal?
Oh my gosh. Netflix, this company that made $30 billion last year,
Hmm.
they decide that they're going to host a live reunion for one of their shows and their tech fails. And so millions of people are tuning in and we're just getting this little spinning sign. And then they said, so sorry, we're going to film it. We will put it out tomorrow. Promise. This is they have one job. This is a tech company. This is a streaming company. They're the experts. They created it. They make $30 billion and they still messed it up.
Right.
Give yourself some grace. You're going to mess it up.
Exactly. It happens. So if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone, is what we can say. I want one more thing, Rach, before I let you go. Is I wanted to ask you about. I know you were diagnosed with breast cancer,
Yes.
not just breast cancer, but triple negative breast cancer in the summer of 2019. And I want to know how that influenced. Was the book already written?
No, the book was not already written. The book was
Okay.
an idea that I had in 2018. And in 2020, I was already like in my healing journey. I'm like, but got my bald head and its hair is a little growing back. And a client says, like, when are you going to write your book? And the idea of writing a book felt like a major overtaking because I had just healed from breast cancer, which was huge. But I will say that when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I already knew that I didn't want to do the conventional approach. I didn't want to do chemo and radiation the way that it was being offered to me, which was 53 weeks of chemo and immunotherapy, and then 6 to 8 weeks of radiation.
Mhm.
And when I first said to the first doctor, like, oh no, I've heard of these other naturopathic modalities, IPT, and I began listing all the things. She looked at me like I was insane. And she was
Mhm.
like, you have the most aggressive, like, this is not, we shouldn't be playing around with that. Then I talked to another doctor, which was the chemotherapy oncologist. And she too, Terri, was just like, now she was the worst. She looked at me like I was this wretched human being. I felt so much judgment. And I said to her, thank you for everything that you've shared with me. I am going to pass on what you are recommending. And I was nervous because this is like one of the best in her field. I was going to the best doctors in cutting edge cancer research and stuff like that at MD Anderson. But that was what was correct and right for me. And here I am 4 years later, cancer free against all the odds. So it did inform the book in that when people were telling me that I couldn't go and get this book deal in the time frame that I wanted, and someone was like, you need to pay me $20,000 and I'll help you a year from now. It was like, that was kind of the stories that I was getting.
Mhm.
It was very easy for me to say, no, thank you. I don't receive that. In fact, what I choose to believe about my circumstances that I'm going to get this book deal. It's going to be a 6-figure book deal. It's going to happen in this time. And Terri, everything that I said would happen, happened because I did not accept what other people were trying to project onto me. And
Mhm.
that's what I walk you through in the book, because people are going to want to tell you who you are and what you're worth and how much you should charge and when you should show up and why you need this treatment and not that treatment.
Mhm.
And at some point, you have to trust that you know yourself. I walk you through how to start knowing yourself,
Mhm.
how to then trust yourself to walk in that faith, and then how to live in the freedom to express it and live it out loud. Doesn't mean that you feel confident 24/7, but you will then have the tools for those moments where you start to doubt or feel hesitation.
So exciting. Well, congratulations, my friend. You guys, Permission to Offend. Tell us where people can get the book and where they can find you.
Yes. Well, since you're already listening to a podcast, you can subscribe to my podcast as well, which is called Permission to Offend. I love hanging out on Instagram. I'm at Girl Confident, and I am responsive in the DMs. So if you ever wanted to practice a safe conversation or you want to say some crazy outlandish things, slide into my DMs and say them, and I'll help you chat through them. And I live at rachelluna.com. So come and visit me.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm so glad that you're healthy. I love this book. I appreciate you. Thanks for being on.
Thank you. I love you.
I love you too.